I want to thank Environmental Facilities Corporation and Sabrina T. for coming to Mamaroneck and talking to us about the very important opportunities they're providing for infrastructure funding. And as I said a little earlier, we in New York desperately need this kind of funding because we are a very populated state with very old infrastructure. And some of that infrastructure happens to be underground, so we have not been paying as much attention to it as we need to. And in communities like ours, in the town of Mamaroneck, we've got a big number that we're going to have to fund to improve our sewer infrastructure. So we're very interested in this and think it's a great opportunity from the state. I want to just introduce Warren Lucas from North Salem.
Nancy, how are you?
Good, supervisor, and Carl Fugazi from supervisor from Mount Pleasant, and Catherine Parker, the Westchester County legislator from this district, who's also very helpful. And please tell me there's no other elected officials. No, he's coming up, don't worry. Well, I have to thank Steve, though. Steve Otis, our assemblyman, who's, I said earlier, and it's true, is my favorite assemblyman, has really led the effort in Albany to make this a priority in the budget. And we really appreciate that because it's really needed. And it's needed all over the state, but especially here in these communities where we have such older infrastructure. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. And Steve, please come up.
Thank you all for coming. It's nice to see a lot of familiar local government faces, and I always say once a mayor, always a mayor, so I still think like a local government person. And so one of the things that was a priority for me was trying to find ways to solve some of the infrastructure problems we all have at local governments. And so we had, and I have a partner in this, another former mayor, John McDonald, who was the mayor of Cohoes for about the same number of years that I was mayor of Rye, and we came up with an idea last year, knowing the problem that we all have at the local level of paying for clean water infrastructure. You can't afford it. You can't afford to go into all that debt to make these projects happen. So we came up with a proposal to create a new grant program that would allow a state grant to pay for part of these projects and then allow that borrowing cost for local governments to become more affordable. And we pitched it to our colleagues in the Assembly and got a lot of support from the new Speaker, Carl Hastie. I had an opportunity to present the proposal to the governor last year before the budget passed. The governor was very enthusiastic about it and very supportive. And so we went through the budget process last year, and a new program, alas, was created called the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. And it was originally slated to be $200 million over 3 years to do these kinds of projects, grants to municipalities. And in the first year, the first cycle was due, as some of you are aware, the applications were out on September 4th, am I right? Or they due September 4th. They were due September 4th. They came out last summer, and the governor added another $25 million to the 2015 round, so that they were going to have $75 million to distribute, adding 25 million in federal money. And I have to compliment Sabrina T., who I'll talk about a little when I really introduce her. But EFC, who I worked with when I was a mayor, it's a great agency. It is really our agency to help do financing for water projects for local governments. That's their only reason for being. And you really know them primarily through the revolving loan program. And what we discovered was there's a lot of revolving loan funds that aren't requested because you can't afford to go into all that debt. So 2015 was the rollout of a brand new program, and EFC did a fantastic job of explaining the program, of trying to distribute the projects around the state and to make it a successful venture, so much so that the feedback was so good that this year the governor in his proposed budget decided to propose adding another $100 million to that original $200 million. And then we had the budget negotiations, and we in the legislature were pushing for even more money. And so this year, when the budget was enacted, in addition to last year's $200 million over 3 years, we've added an additional $200 million, which means that a program that did not exist a year ago now is worth $425 million in grants to local governments to do clean water projects. I could not be more excited, except I'm more excited that you're all here and that we're going to learn not just about the water grant program, but learn and ask questions of the crew from EFC on all of their programs so that we in Westchester are better able to take advantage of these programs and draw money down here. Now, Sabrina has just been great to work with, and since last summer, we've been in contact regularly and talking about how the rollout and the needs of local governments. And I'll tell you, Sabrina has been so responsive to just sort of the feedback that I got from many of you and what I knew myself in terms of do's and don'ts. And so I'm very happy with how responsive EFC has been and Sabrina has been in terms of trying to make this successful and work with the realities that we all deal with in Westchester and local governments all around the state. So without further ado, Sabrina T., really, you're here among friends in Westchester and your crew from EFC. Thank you for all you do, and we're eager to do more with you with the grant program and the other programs that you're going to talk about today. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Steve. I mean, for those of you who weren't here earlier, I did share that Steve was one of the first people I started talking to a lot when I first started my job, and I did learn a lot from him, not the least of which actually because I wasn't there when the grant program was enacted, about what the intent was, what were the goals, what were the issues that we were trying to get addressed. And he has been an incredible advocate, an incredible supporter, and just being able to have that conversation with him has been very, very helpful, because as much as we're always trying to do the best that we can do, I think it's sometimes very easy to lose touch with who your clients really are and what is it that they really need and what is it that they're looking for. The other reason that I have been able to be as successful, I think, as I have been, is because of the team that I have at EFC. And I've had there's incredible history there, there's incredible depth, and for those of you that are here, know that they've been really great. Although I know Warren is going to miss Fred Testa, but there's there are a lot of people that are really fantastic. And when Steve and I started talking about this and saying, he said, you have to come to West, you have to talk to us. You've talked to us about EFC. I said, you know what? The only way that I feel that I could do it justice was to bring my team with me and members of my team with me. So, and really the way I want to think of today is sort of, walking you through, from project, so a day in the life of a project, but it's more than a day, right? It's sort of like, so the life of a project as it, how do you come to EFC? How does it really start? Who's eligible? How do you pay for it? What are the things that we have to go through? But then in addition to that, I think it's really important that we also talk about our GIGP program, which is focused on green innovation and grants and funding for that area, especially as we know it's actually a great solution with regards to stormwater and those kinds of issues which are very relevant in this area of this state. So that's sort of the big picture of what we're going to talk about. So just overview, who are we really, right? I mean, legally, public benefit corporation, agency, however you want to call us, but really we are a way to provide, low-cost capital and grants for water quality improvement projects. Clean water, drinking water, and people have called us New York State's water infrastructure bank. We're a $12 billion corporation, And that is actually reflective, and the reason that I think I'm really proud of that number is not because I get to be president and CEO of something that sounds really big, but what that really is that it's a reflection of the investment that we've actually made in New York State with regards to water infrastructure. So those numbers are due to, all the work that has been done by EFC throughout the state. And so again, low-cost financial assistance. And one of those, and what we're going to do is, as we go through this is, and each one will, everyone will introduce themselves, but engineering, legal, finance, and our green infrastructure group will sort of walk through each piece, what's important, at each stage of the game. How do we provide low-cost financing? How is it that we're able to do that? But again, what are the, how do you get in? So again, just a quick thing as to, who we are. Again, national leader in water infrastructure investment. So we have incredible needs. There's a lot that's going out there. I've been very, very focused on it. But interestingly enough, right, except if you went outside of the water infrastructure world, EFC not really a familiar entity to a lot of people. And we were sort of like a nice, almost quiet little agency for people that kind of knew what we were doing and were looking for. But with Flint, and then closer to home in New York State with Hoosick, and then a whole bunch of other issues, there has been a new focus on water infrastructure and the importance of water infrastructure. And as we were talking about earlier, it's underground, so nobody really pays attention to it, and nobody really cares until something goes wrong, right? You turn on your tap, nothing comes out, or you turn on your tap, something not very attractive comes out, right? You can't flush, you can't shower. So there's a lot of it's then when people start to think about it. But as an assemblyman, right, knew he was sort of focused on it at the beginning, and before all of this happening. But with all of this happening, there's been again now a renewed focus, shall we say, on water infrastructure and what we do. But as you can see, we've been very active. Since 2011 alone, we've had $9 billion in subsidized loans, grants, refinancings. So again, something we'll talk about, but we don't just, have low-cost financing available. We also work with our communities when we say, I think of it much in the way of, the rates have gone down, things are cheaper, and so, let's refinance. Let's save the communities more money. And we do a calculation how much it is. We reach out to our communities and clients and say, by the way, you can save more. Here's the way we do it. So we're very, very active. We don't just sort of do business with you and then walk away and sort of see you later. And largest 5-year investment in clean water infrastructure since the creation of the state revolving programs, which for the clean water goes back to the late 80s, and for drinking water to the early 90s. So, in that period of time, New York really is a leader. And if you go to to these national conferences, everyone's always very interested in what we're talking about and what we're doing. One of the things that actually everybody has been talking about is the New York State water grants. So it's interesting because recently there was a national organization, and there was a conference, and one of the things, and we were going to be presenting at it, and something what somebody said to us is, well, you know what, that's great. You can talk about what you guys do, but we're really interested in what New York is doing with regards to the water grants, because New York is the only state that actually has a state-funded program for that purpose in the country. And again, something that I think, because it's something the Assemblyman has been very, very focused on and saying, okay, this is a priority, and actually, interestingly, addressing a concern of something that, since I've reached EFC, where it really is a problem, right? Because of the way that the federal program is built, it really is focused on what you hear us talk about with regards to hardship communities and for those that are in the greatest level of distress. But the question really is, and one that we talk about incessantly internally, but then with the water grants and hopefully with more funding it can help go in this direction, is that what about those communities that I think of, that I sort of call them the middle-class parents of the communities? And I think it's perhaps, on my own personal level, my son's a junior and he's about to go into college. And, and so I sort of feel like we're sort of like, my husband, we're sort of caught in the middle of, we make too much money to qualify for anything, yet we don't really make enough to be able to pay for anything very easily. And, and so I think of a lot of communities in that same box with regards to water infrastructure and what can we do. With regards to the water grants, I mean, as the Assemblyman has talked about, $400 million, right, in grants, was authorized. There's been significant increases. I mean, we went from $50 million to $175 million. Those kinds of numbers just don't happen on a year-to-year basis and doing that. And that shows you the focus and the interest that folks have on it and the importance of what's going on. But I think most importantly for everyone here is that, what I am hoping at EFC is that it provides everyone with an opportunity who hasn't been able to who hasn't, viewed EFC as necessarily a viable alternative to say, oh, you know what? But with this piece of grant, it is actually going to be enough when we sit down and we sharpen our pencils and do the math, that a combination of the grant with the low-cost loan, that it then becomes something that's affordable, something that incentivizes and sort of brings people up and over the edge to be able to address long-standing concerns, and that you actually don't have to have things in a really bad way in order to be able to somehow get financial support in order to be able to address it. So again, it's pretty interesting. Round 2, we opened up earlier this year. The applications are available. So we had talked about that, and we had also talked about with regards to any increases in the aid that would come in this year for grant, we would fold into round 2. So we're actually trying to work through the process and the mechanics of how that's going to work, because obviously it's $100 million more than double what we were anticipating. So there's a lot of conversations of how do we address that? How do we accommodate it? What are the projects? There's a lot of questions that I think are still out there, again, that we're trying to work our way through. But I can tell you that even last year, it was significantly oversubscribed, and there were a number of projects. And last year, we really had to limit eligibility to certain categories, again, trying to balance the need between, improving water quality as well as what we've traditionally called our hardship communities. So, and I'm really hoping that information, I've been having daily conversations with the chamber, so I'm hoping that there's going to be more clarity on that within the next week. And certainly, when we do, we will actually be, we're going to be reaching out to the communities that we know have reached out to us. We have things that are on our website. That's something that I would check. We would hold another webinar. There's a lot of outreach that we're going to do, so we will ensure that there isn't going to be any community that is somehow unaware of any of the changes that we may make to round 2 and how it may impact them. And making sure, and I think topmost on my mind, right, is ensuring that everyone actually gets a fair opportunity to come in and everyone's aware of that opportunity, because I think there's nothing more frustrating than, and certainly I think on everybody's part, to say, hey, we worked really hard, we got you all of this, and now all I'm hearing about is about how I didn't know about it and how I can't access it, and now I feel like somehow I didn't have that opportunity, and that's not something that I want to squander in the least. So, general questions, right? Who can apply? Municipalities that under the definitions of state law. So counties, city, towns, villages, district corporations, county or town improvement districts, any public benefit corporation or public authority. School districts are a little trickier so there's school districts that are interested. I encourage a conversation because of the way of its interaction with the state revolving fund vis-a-vis the grant, as well as the recognized Indian nations or tribes. So what are the types of projects that are eligible for funding? Again, water quality infrastructure at municipally owned facilities. So we're really talking about replacement or repair of drinking water, wastewater infrastructure, as well as compliance with federal or state environmental and public laws and regulations. So it's generally what really people think of as water infrastructure. what are some of the program requirements? And again, you'll see as we do the presentation later on that this is really a subset of what we require when anybody comes into us for financing. But, just to sort of hit some high points, we need all the environmental review requirements, SEQR, SHPO. There are MWBE requirements, smart growth, and as with all the SRF finance projects, because again, this is a partly grant, partly loan. If you come through with us on the SRF, there's also federal requirements that are tied to the program, which is the federal prevailing wage, as well as American iron and steel. So if you have something that's over 50% iron or steel, it has to be manufactured, forged, produced in the U.S. So there's some information with, and we can always go back to this later, and we can provide this if people are interested. But we have FAQs, we have websites for submitting it to. And the one thing that I want to make sure that I also talk about here before everyone starts is that what I want everyone to remember is that we really are there to also provide, not just saying, okay, give us your loan, here's what it is. We're really there to provide technical support. And I have an incredible staff that does that. So, if there's engineering questions, they can help. If there are legal questions, because what's the SEQR? What do we do? What needs to go in our bond reso? That's something we can help. Financing, the staff sort of walks through with each community and walks through step by step by step and says, okay, here's what it is, here's what we need, here's how we get here, here's the numbers, here's why it makes sense. But we really are available anytime to, just sort of pick up the phone, and you'll always be able to get a body. I mean, one of the things I've talked about that I really love being at EFC is that because we are so small, we can be very agile and we can be very responsive. And so that is one of the advantages of that, and I would really encourage people because, we would much rather you ask us the question, come in, talk to us up front, even if you're just thinking about it, because we can often give guidance and point people in the right direction as to what they have to, what direction you have to go in, what you need to look at. And we have and all we want, right, is we actually just want to help the communities out. Right, there's no fee in it for us. There's no agenda. There's nothing that's involved. I mean, we will give you our honest opinion on which way to go, what do you really need, and what are the things. Instead of having people run around trying to chase grant or trying to chase the loan, just come to us, have a conversation, and we'll walk you through it, literally. So with that, we're going to move into the people who really know what they're doing, and we're going to actually start with Tim Burns, who is the division director for my Division of Engineering and Program Management. So, and it actually all starts with Tim. So he would think it all ends with him too, but that's a different story.
Thank you very much. So I wasn't sure if this was applause internally or outside. I don't know if you've been here in the rain outside, but that's exactly what we're here to talk about is water quality issues. And I'm a former Westchester resident. I lived in Dobbs Ferry and Mount Kisco, so it feels like coming home here. Thanks for having us. So I'm here to talk about the State Revolving Fund, which Sabrina had mentioned was an outgrowth of the Federal Clean Water Act back in the late 80s. When EPA and Congress decided to create a block grant program, and it's truly an infrastructure bank that provides financial assistance, and it's an endowment that the federal government provides money for every $5 federal dollars. The state kicks in $1, and that goes into a fund that allows us to make low-interest loans to municipalities to improve and protect water quality and public health throughout the state. It was so good that they created they followed it with the drinking water program. So clean water, low-cost financing for wastewater and water quality. These are the iconic egg-shaped digesters at the Newtown Creek Treatment Plant in Brooklyn. So if you're ever coming out of Manhattan into into Queens and you look to your right, you'll see these glaring in the sunlight on a day when it is sunny. That's the largest treatment plant, by the way, in New York State, 310 MGD. The Clean Water Program is funded by both EFC and DEC, and we fund basic water quality projects. The ones you most certainly know, wastewater treatment plants, like the treatment plant just down the road here, the Mamaroneck treatment plant that's run by Westchester County, that we provided $24 million worth of grant funds under the Recovery Act 6 years ago. Non-point source projects, which are water quality projects that DEC does not regulate from a water quality standpoint. They will deal with decentralized systems, landfills for stormwater control, and remediation projects. And then national estuary projects, which in Westchester County you should be very familiar with. Long Island Sound is one of the 3 national estuaries in New York State. There are 27 nationally. The other 2 in New York State, Peconic Bay on the east end and the New York-New Jersey Harbor Estuary. So I mentioned the drinking water program. So in the late 80s, the Clean Water Act was amended. The fund was created, and it was doing such a good job that when they passed the Safe Drinking Water Act in 1996, they modeled that program after the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And what they fund are drinking water projects for treatment plants, distribution mains, storage facilities. They do not fund dams, however. That's an important nuance to be aware of. So the revolving funds, as I mentioned, it's an endowment. So it creates a sustainable pot of cash that we can draw from to fund the highest water quality and public health projects throughout the state. And one of the ways we're able to, for our hardship communities that Sabrina mentioned, we drive interest rates down as low as 0%. For borrowers that are not in that situation, we do provide a lower interest rate to improve their water quality and public health projects. At most recent rates, ballpark 4%, we can knock down your rate on the clean water side down at 2%, which over 30 years saves millions of dollars in avoided interest payments, which can then go towards improving even more water quality projects. And we do that because we're in the market regularly, so we pool those diverse group of borrowers, provides economy of scale when we do closings. We're in there so regularly, so you don't have to worry about getting your own bond counsel and go on the market for your own bonding. We do that on your behalf. And because of that, we've over time built such a good reputation that we have the highest bond rating available, AAA. We're actually better than the federal government. The first step is to give us an engineering report and list your project. And by federal statute, we have to identify all of the projects on our intended use plans, also known as our IUPs. And we operate the program off a federal fiscal year, which begins on October 1st, so we're halfway through our federal fiscal year and ends on September 30th. For clean water and drinking water, those programs have scoring systems that are driven around water quality and public health. We rank and score those projects based on their schedule, needs of their monies, as well as protection and improvement of water quality, and we rank them accordingly, and then we compare how much money we have, and that's where we draw our line in terms of being able to provide subsidy. As Sabrina mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of need out there. How much nationally on the clean water side? The most recent report that came out in January, $271 billion worth of wastewater needs nationally, and in New York, $31 billion over the next 20 years. So that's about $1.5 billion a year, just in New York State. And the federal appropriation was about $1.5 billion, so New York State could take the entire federal appropriation, which they won't let us do, by the way. We have to share it with the other 49 states and Puerto Rico. So to list our project, we use that information, we rank and score you, and we want you to come in so we can communicate with you. So if you're thinking about a project, list your project with us, even if you don't have an engineering report yet, so we can keep you in the know as to what's going on with the program and new opportunities. We do e-blasts on a regular basis so that you know that we're on our back, that we're out there to try and help you with your large infrastructure needs. And there's turnover in local government from time to time. I see Warren Lucas, who's still the town supervisor, so it's good to see steady leadership in North Salem. But to that end, that doesn't always happen. So new leaders come on board, and we're trying to ensure that there's a continuity, that our program is out there, because that's why we exist, is to provide that financial assistance. And the main way we learn about your project is through our engineering report. So having an engineer look at a problem, identify, assess different alternatives, as well as the cost and effectiveness of those particular solutions, puts the community in the best position to tackle that problem. Because once you've addressed your engineering needs, then it's a matter of, okay, how do we build a plan of finance so we can fund that project in a manner that works to your advantage? And when we have those grants can be available, but ultimately we're substantially a loan program. And we want to do this in a sustainable manner. So we're also looking to have the engineer do life cycle cost analysis, identify especially stormwater projects. There might be opportunities for green infrastructure that should be considered and where appropriate implemented. Energy efficiency, where you buy a new pump, put a variable frequency drive on that, you can save a tremendous amount of money when it comes to operating and maintaining that facility. Smart growth, we want you to think about your planning as you're assessing your project, so that you don't just think now, you think also in the long term, and you think about where you're building your facilities. Which drives, and smart growth drives more thinking towards existing disturbed areas rather than pushing into green areas. And obviously, and one of the things that has hit both Westchester County, downstate, there's only, back in 2012, Hurricane Sandy, the year before that, Irene and Lee. Storm resiliency, we're seeing variabilities in weather patterns, right? This has been an El Nino year, so out west, they're getting hit very hard with storms. It's been one of the driest winters that we've had. So with that, but we've seen more extremes on that storms, and we're looking to ensure that the wastewater infrastructure and the drinking water infrastructure that we put in, oftentimes we'll go in and it may be there for 100 years. Coney Island Treatment Plant down in Brooklyn has been there since the late 1800s. It's still there. So once you site these facilities, they often become the permanent location. So when we site the new facilities, we want to ensure that they're outside of the 500-year floodplain so that they can withstand any storms, because when they go out of service, it creates tremendous environmental problems, public health risks, and that damaged equipment and facilities may not be able to recover as quickly once the storm recedes. So we want to protect that infrastructure appropriately. I mentioned smart growth. So in 2010, the New York State Legislature passed and Governor Patterson signed the Smart Growth Public Infrastructure Policy Act, which requires that New York State funding entities fund projects that are consistent with smart growth principles. It encourages redevelopment in existing community centers. It's not a no-growth plan, but it's a smart growth plan, so that we ensure that we're driving money towards projects that have good planning at the forefront, which is why the engineering report becomes the foundation for all your projects through the State Revolving Fund. And we see that that works well. Repairing existing infrastructure in existing developed areas oftentimes is much cheaper. It would also protect important natural and historic resources. EFC is required, as I mentioned, to do this before we make any funding commitment. And our clients, we ask when you submit your engineering report to us that you also complete the Smart Growth Assessment Form, which your engineer should be able to do on your behalf very easily, so that we are ensuring that smart growth is always part of the plan. And at this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to our Executive Deputy Counsel, Mr. George Chalakis.
Thank you, Tim. Tim talked about listing a project on the IUP. Once you list your project on the IUP, it's time to submit your application. As soon as you submit your application, that our staff can work with you to start on your financing. Let's see if I, all right. As part of the application process, you got to submit an application. You got to submit a clean water or drinking water SRF application. Along with that, you have to complete the state environmental quality review process. I was told this morning that I couldn't describe it in less than an hour, but I'll do it in 2 minutes. Seeker requires that all state and local government agencies assess the environmental significance of all actions it may approve or fund or undertake. To comply with Seeker, a municipality must classify your project either as a Type 1, an unlisted action, or a Type 2 action. Type 1 and Type 2 actions, a recipient must establish themselves as lead agent, and they must solicit comments from all involved agencies. EFC and DEC are two involved agencies on the clean water side. On the drinking water side, it's EFC and Department of Health. You must complete a full environmental assessment form. You must undertake a coordinated review, and you must determine the environmental significance of your project, either by declaring a negative declaration or a positive declaration. We see very few positive declarations, and there's additional environmental requirements if it is a positive deck. And in the end, you have to publish in the environmental notice bulletin your neg deck or your pos deck. A Type 2 action, the community must classify it as a Type 2, and they do that by adopting a resolution citing the regulatory exemption that is applicable to that project. Part and parcel with Seeker is sign off by SHPO or New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. SHPO requires that all publicly funded projects must review impacts of cultural and historical resources. SHPO will provide you, once you consult with SHPO, they'll provide you either with a no impact letter or they'll work with you on additional archaeological review. The next step, I guess I gotta catch up, is the creation or formation of a water district or a sewer district. This applies only to towns and counties. It establishes the mechanism for charging benefited users. And for towns, it's under Article 12 of the town law, and for counties, it's Article 5 of the county law. Lastly, you have to adopt a bond resolution. Basically, a bond resolution establishes your legal authority to issue debt for the project. Section 32 of the local finance law basically provides the minimum details that are required in a bond resolution. And I'll just highlight a few of them. There must be a statement of specific object or purpose for which the financing is being authorized. You must have the maximum cost for each project purpose. You should also include the amount of bonds to be issued, the period of probable usefulness for each project or purpose, and you also have to determine the proposed maturity of the bonds. Also, we like to see each municipality choose between two formulas to pay debt service, either net level debt service or the 50% rule. Additional requirements to complete your application is MWB information on your engineering agreements or your construction contracts. We administer the MWBE requirements for the state. Additionally, there are permits and approvals that have to be received. Either permits may include a Speedies permit, a water supply permit, Army Corps of Engineers permit. The approvals range from OSC approval to approval of your plans and specs and your engineering report. We like to see all the contracts and agreements related to the project and any amendments thereto. We're a cost incurred program, so we need to see all the invoices supporting the costs to date on your project. We also like to see the existing debt information or any third-party funding sources so that we can properly size your financing and also make sure that we're all in compliance with local finance law. And lastly, any intermunicipal agreements on your projects, we like to have copies of those. It's critical in multi-community projects. It usually establishes ownership, operation, and maintenance of the project, and any intermunicipal agreement should go for the term of the financing with EFC. And next, I'd like to introduce Audra Novoselsky, who's our Deputy Director of Public Finance.
We're going backwards. There we go. So once you have all of those good things in, we can actually start to develop your loan. We put a timeline up there of 4 to 6 months, and I actually kind of hate saying that because it's dependent upon projects, as all of you know. If you've done these projects, you know, some things are ready to go like that. Sometimes it takes a little longer in the planning stage. So we really do like to work through it with you, not close the loan too soon, but work towards it so that, you know, when you need it to be closed and the money needs to be there, that we're ready to go. Part of the reason why we put 4 to 6 months is, you know, on our end, we really like to work with you as quickly as you need us to pull things together. We do have a few things. We need to bring projects to our board, and we also need to bring the projects to get PACB, Public Authority Control Board, approval at the state level. So that builds in a little bit of an element of time in that we have to have things ready to hit those deadlines. But during that period when we're developing your loan, obviously, we'll go through everything that you've put in on your application, go through that with you. If anything's not quite right, we'll work with you, we'll call you, we'll let you know. We work on sizing the loan also. A lot of times the project, you may have an estimated budget. As we work further towards closing the loan, things may go out to bid. You may have a better idea of what the cost may actually be, and we want to try to get the size of the loan right. Clearly, we don't want you having any more debt than you're actually going to need for the project, so we work through that with you. We look at some things for credit review and are in contact with you on that. We review the contracts. Then we move to loan closing, and then obviously disbursement of funds. And when we go long-term, the loan servicing for, generally it's a 30-year term. Sometimes we do a 20-year term, depending on what the municipality would want. So throughout the life of the short-term financing, though, because most projects go into a short-term financing, and then we bring you long-term after a period of 3 to 5 years, depending on the project. So during that short-term financing, we are in continual contact with you to maintain an accurate project budget. As I said, you know, as we move along in the project, costs may change, so we would work to, if anything needs to be resized, we would work to resize it before we actually take you long-term. We ensure that the costs are actually eligible and compliant with any of the contracts that may be on the project, and a lot of that has to do with what Tim talked about in terms of some of the eligibility requirements in order to access the SRF money. Also, we work to make sure that you're in compliance with local finance law. There's a lot of rules about repayments and everything. We coordinate if you have third-party funding. We have a lot of projects which actually have third-party funding, so we kind of take that in and work with you on that. And obviously, during the short term, we can be dispersing funds for the project costs as you're spending them. You send us the invoice, we review it, and get the money back out to you. And then, as I mentioned, we do go long-term. Tim talked about this also in terms of our rates. We do have competitive rates. We do every summer, generally, a pool financing. bring a bunch of projects together so that you can have access to those. Starting in 2014, our bonds were actually designated as green bonds, which was the first ever for SRFs nationally. So we're proud of that. So just to review the important deadlines, now this is for SRF funding. April 22nd, 2016 is when a project listing and update information is due for the clean water in terms of getting your project listed on the 2017 IUP. That's federal fiscal year 2017. May 15th is the corresponding deadline for the drinking water side of that. Sometime in July of this year, we will put out our draft IUPs, and those IUPs will become effective on October 1st. So if you're listed, October 1st is when everything starts. And then December 1st, you would submit an application if you're pursuing hardship financing, and then all the rest of the applications need to come in by March 1st every year. And with that, I will turn it over to Brian Hahn, who is going to talk about our green infrastructure funding program. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian Hahn. I'm with the Green Policy Planning and Infrastructure Unit at EFC. And what we really focus on for green infrastructure, I know a lot of people you hear going green all over the place, but what we really focus on is that water quality and really treating that storm water as green infrastructure. And in many of your municipalities, I think mostly you'll be looking at a local scale, which is really a site-specific neighborhood approach, downtown approach really, to combat stormwater with different green infrastructure practices. So what we've devised at EFC in 2009 through President Obama's American Reinvestment and Recovery Act was a Green Innovation Grant Program. And since then we've awarded $130 million to 172 projects across the state. We're part of Governor Cuomo's Regional Economic Development Council. The consolidated funding application is how you apply to our program. And Sabrina in her budget talk earlier talked about 4,100 projects through the REDC so far. We've had funding as part of 75 of those, so we're highly active and been part of that since the inception. We will also be part of that this year. We expect, if there's no announcement yet, but historically the timeline has been sometime in May that the applications will open and run through July, with the announcements sometime in December. So as the GIGP, we have goals that really hope to address and improve water quality, like I said, through the green infrastructure practices that I'll discuss shortly, but it's really to address stormwater. It's really, when you look at it, right now there's a lot of pipes underground, and a lot of the water gets conveyed there through impervious surfaces, and it goes through the pipes and it ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. Well, during heavy storm events, which we've heard on the roof earlier today, those the water goes through with a higher intensity, and you might have many extra overflows and untreated water going into the receiving water bodies. So what green infrastructure really does is it maintains and treats the stormwater on site. So through infiltration and evapotranspiration practices, that it really stops that water from getting into that collection system and making it down to the wastewater treatment plant. And through our program, we want to build capacity and teach municipalities across the state how they can, and even in their capital improvement projects, really institute this into their overall project plans. So some of the green infrastructure practices are there's 8 of them really that we use through our funding source, which is the EPA. And there's categorically eligible practices, so we don't just make these up. These are really what we can do in the community and what the EPA funding source will allow us to do. And the first one is porous pavement. This is really, if you look on your road, there's impervious pavement and porous pavement. The impervious usually flows off, goes to that collection system, hits the pipes, and down to the wastewater treatment plant it goes. Where in this case, there's actually a subbase underneath this pavement, and the water actually goes through the porous asphalt, which is a little thick, or the porosity is a little wider. So water actually is allowed to flow through there, and it goes to the sub-base, which is usually made of stone. And it sits in there and it infiltrates through your natural soils, so it doesn't ever reach that receiving water body, and it relieves that stress on the wastewater treatment plants. Also, we have a project up in Lake George that's been in the ground for about 3 years now. It's a roadway it's on Beach Road, right on the water. And there's actual pervious and impervious areas of that. And actually, the impervious areas are having potholes and maintenance issues where the porous pavement's been holding up very well. Another instance is bioretention or rain gardens. These are vegetated areas with a sub-base under them, and you can really plug and chug these in a lot of areas. You can use, even if your soils aren't conducive to it, you can use structural soils we've seen that you can excavate out farther, and you really can put these anywhere. This is actually in Canandaigua, New York, where you can see there's a huge sea of really concrete sidewalk, and they had to repair some leaky gas lines. So they decided they really wanted to beautify their neighborhood, increase the on-site treatment. So they said, well, let's look to the Green Innovation Grant Program. What can we do there? They said, all right. They submitted a proposal. It's got porous pavers. If you look at the picture on the left, those pavers there's areas for the water to get through there to the sub-base, and also the vegetated area. If you look 3/4 of the way up on the picture there, and we use illustrations the best because it's easier to feel, we feel it's easier to feel this, but the roadway runoff actually comes through there. There's a filter there, a curb cut, and it flows right in, and it goes into this bioretention area with trees and other vegetated areas that are really designed to take on that storm water. And they're hardier plants, and they really soak up that water, so they really maximize the benefit. And the water actually flows off the sidewalk as well. And what Canandaigua has found is not only does it improve their water quality and the amount of water or the reduction of water that goes down into their collection system, but it's actually brought that street back to life. There's people that are sitting on there, you have the hot dog vendors there, but it brings people back out, it beautifies the area, so there's multiple economic benefits rather than just the water benefit. Another infrastructure practice is green roofs and green walls. I think New York City has a large program right now, but this is actually a project out in Syracuse. We partnered with the Environmental Facilities College out there, and what they've done is really they've constructed the green roof. They've used a lot of native species and plants, and they've taken it a step farther. And really, we've provided 3 years of monitoring to see how effective the green roof is. The green infrastructure is really newer technology, so we still have to prove that it's effective, and we're not wasting the taxpayers' dollars on this. But what they've done is they've provided a monitoring plan that really looks at these native species, because you really want them kind of to mimic the natural hydrology and mimic what is in the area. So you want to hit that as close as possible. And so they're in the middle of a 3-year period right now where they're studying these projects and really looking at the benefit of different species on that green roof, and they'll compile a plant palette that we can use throughout New York State. Stormwater street trees, we see these really as a component of a green streets element. I think in the earlier presentation, the governor's REDC, one of the main initiatives this year is that neighborhood revitalization. Well, this is a part that doesn't only provide economic benefit, but it's got that water quality, so it serves multiple benefits, so it's really stretching that dollar further. And the project on the right is the picture on the left is actually the before picture of a street in Rome, and on the right what they've done is they've used this FlexiPlave material, which is really a porous, it's actually rubberized, but it's a porous material that allows that water to flow through. And a lot of times there's 2 different types of tree pits that you can have. There's some that you put in and it's just literally that confined area. The tree lasts about 8 to 10 years, and then you'll find you'll be walking out of your office one day and there's this tree stump right there because the tree got too large, the roots were too balled up, and it didn't really work out for you. So there's a stormwater tree pit, which actually provides, it's a bottomless pit where it allows the roots from the tree to grow. So one, it helps the tree healthier and longer life, but 2, that tree is allowed now to do some work for you. It takes the flow off of that sidewalk, and it really treats that water on site again and infiltrates, and through evapotranspiration, it treats and reduces water that, as you'll see the theme here, reduces water that flows to the collection system. So you really want to keep your treatment on site. In a more naturalized area here, which is outside of the urban area, we have a project in Babylon where they had an old, I believe it was a car dealership, and they had a lot of concrete there, and we helped. It was a combination of our money, parks, and Department of State. We got rid of that car dealership, and we went back to the project and said, how do we make this, a benefit to the public? So through parks, they created a park here, and what we've done here is we've taken an old wetland that was, compromised, for better words or not, for the car dealership. Once that was out of there, we helped restore that wetland. So it provides a natural function, natural habitat's restored, and that's actually a larger filter for that water coming through to go into the receiving water body, which is that's not Long Island Sound in Babylon, is it? Gray South Bay, so it's on the other side. I'll consult my local Long Island expert. And then just south of here, if you hop on the Amtrak or Metro North and take a little short ride down, you hit the Yonkers station. If you look to your left, you'll see this picture here. This is the stream daylighting that they've done down there. And what it previously was really was just a piped area where that water was just flowing directly into the Hudson River. But they saw, their mayor had a vision and said, you know what? Let's revitalize this downtrodden area, beautify it, and at the same time create a water quality benefit. So they daylit the stream, and now it's got natural elements to it. It slows the water's flow. The water sediment's treated. There's reduction of phosphorus and nitrates through there, and it's brought back that little part of the area of Yonkers to life. So there's multiple benefits to green infrastructure. It really does provide a water quality benefit, but it also provides many ancillary benefits to your community as well. So this is actually a combination of these two practices. There's downspout disconnection and stormwater harvesting reuse projects. This is one in Syracuse. They were pretty innovative here. They took the rainwater that was coming down off the roof, which would typically come down through a pipe. It's an illicit connection right to the collection system and go right to the wastewater treatment plant, which is a large volume of water off this roof here. So what they did was they provided a rainwater treatment plant, or not treatment, but collection system inside the basement of the War Memorial. You can see in the picture on the right, there's a rainwater coming in. There's cisterns on the side, and it takes that first flush out, is what we call it. It takes all the sediments and everything out. But after that, it collects all the rainwater. And what they end up using it for is the hockey rink on the left, where their minor league hockey team plays, and they have ice time for the community. So they save potable water, they reuse the rainwater, and it's a win-win for everybody, and it saves them on their potable water bill as well. So that's a quick rundown of the practices, and I always like to welcome any calls. You'll get our information after the call, but if you're new to green infrastructure, we really want to help you out. We have experts on our staff that we want to get you through the door. We want to walk you through because, I forgot to mention, our grant's 90%, 10% match. So we'll fund 90%. The municipalities will fund 10%. So we're really vested in these projects. We want to see them be successful, and we really want to work with you guys as partners to do that. So for this round of funding, we don't have a dollar amount identified yet, but historically we're anywhere between $10 to $15 million, and our need has been far exceeded that. Last year we had $14.85 million, and we had $90 million in requests. So it's a very competitive program. But like I said before, our goals are really improve and protect water quality. We want to spur innovation and build capacity across the state, and have this more of the norm as part of your green and gray systems. Like I said, give us a call. We have technical expertise. We've had close to 180 projects things come up, site constraints happen everywhere. It's various site conducive technology and practices. And then the final bullet, which is becoming one of our largest bullets, is we're working with New York State DEC. Really, we want to see how we can help affect this in combined sanitary and storm sewer areas where they have the overflows, where it has the largest negative effect. So we want to try to benefit those communities and really focus on a green-gray mix, or where you can really implement the green infrastructure to help reduce those. So with that, sorry. So as you apply, there's, like I said before, we're through the consolidated funding application, and you go online, you'll see our box, you click on the GIGP program, you'll go through our questions, and then there's 4 documents that we request that you submit, or we really require. It's a feasibility study, which is short of an engineering report. And since green infrastructure is so site conducive, you really want to know what you're dealing with. Bad soils can be overcome. High groundwater, high bedrock doesn't allow for infiltration. It might not be the best for you in your area. But like I said, if you're starting to see those issues come up, give us a call. We'll talk to you. We'll see what we can do and go through the options that are available. And then next is a location map where you are. It gives our scoring panel really an idea of where you are, what water bodies you're by, what's your environment. And then along with that is a conceptual site plan. It's really, say you want to do a green street, it's a picture of the street, and then an overlay. You want to put some trees in, a bioretention area, you get the green in there. And then site photographs, just give our crew really an idea of what's going on your site, what it looks like, and what the opportunities are there. And with that, I will turn it back over to our President and CEO, Sabrina.
So I know that was a lot of information to absorb. I think you understand why I put Brian last, because he has 90% grant. I was like, what are you going to talk about that part? But it is a highly competitive program. But again, it's also a direction that EFC generally as an organization is very interested in going towards, right? What really Brian is talking about has been a lot of, for lack of a term, standalone projects on what we can do with regards to green. But more and more, we're trying to move towards how can we incorporate green into our base program, so you have green as well as gray solutions, and then going out there and talking about it to say, okay, and giving us the opportunity actually to educate a lot of communities that, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of misinformation about green that's out there, and it's just based on a lack of understanding as to what it can mean. So, for example, the porous pavements really can be as durable or more durable than the permeable. That, in fact, no, you're not going to be replanting those trees every year as long as you plant the right ones to start with. So there's a lot of conversations about that. And then now people are interested, and what we're really looking at, right, are the very innovative, for lack of a term, bigger projects, the green roofs, that sort of thing. What can we do with that? How does that improve? Because it serves multiple purposes. And it's not just about treating the water. It is about beautification. It's about some place for folks to go. But what I really hope to have shown you, and we'll turn it over to Q&A, it's just a very, again, top-level EFC 101, right? So who are we? What do we do? How do you access it? And I hope that we've sort of clarified things for a little bit for people today, because even though we are known as an infrastructure bank, I really do think of us as being a lot more than that, obviously, because we're the bank in the sense that we are, I think, a very viable mechanism to help you access low-cost financing that on your own you would not be able to access, right? And we have a lot of level and high-level expertise to help you walk through that process. And there's also a lot, too, that we provide assistance on. So from the very beginning, on the engineering, what's going on, this project makes sense, and sometimes we'll be like, yeah, maybe you should think about this, maybe there's that instead. putting in that, putting in the engineering report that Tim was talking about, all the way through to the timing. George sort of walked through, and it's probably the most, the part that nobody ever wants to talk about as a lawyer, right? Nobody ever wants to talk about all the legal stuff. But all of those steps, right? Again, here are the things that are in place, because I think people think of us as this black box. Well, no, really what happens, you come in, we say, okay, here are the next steps. We walk through it. We want to make sure that you're aware. We want to make sure when you're putting together your bond reso that it has the right components to it. When you're doing seeker, type 1 or type 2, what is the analysis? Here are the things that you need. Let us help you check those boxes. And again, in financing, making sure that, again, we're with you from the start through to the end of it, right? So when we talk about short-term and long-term, that's actually, we say those things very casually, but that's actually quite unique to New York State and the way that we help provide that financing. So it's almost as if, in common parlance, almost like a construction loan, right? So as you're building it, as you're putting it together, we're going to make sure that you have access to financing at that period of time. If you've already put out bans, if there's other things, we help you walk through that. We make sure that your timing is right. We make sure that, none of us run afoul of a lot of the local, finance law. Okay, let's go through that. Then let's size it properly. So at the time that you say, okay, project done, pretty much done, how much is it really going to cost? Okay, now let's go to a long-term loan. And costs go up and they go down, depending on what happens with regards to a project. Again, we want to make sure that we're there on, helping, focus that, making sure that what you end up with is not, as Audra talked about, not more debt than you wanted. And again, I wanted Brian here to talk about it because we're not just that, we have other types of programs, and one of the things that there has been a lot of interest in is green. And again, this part of the state particularly has been very interested in pursuing those types of options. So with that, if anybody have any questions, then I'll can hopefully try to direct it to the right staff to help answer. Yes?